Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
It had been raining nonstop since the previous evening, but despite the bad weather, customers were coming to the pharmacy in a steady stream. Aunt Miranda had to keep running to the back room to change the water. No sooner had she returned to the sales floor after another change than the door was slammed loudly, and a man in a raincoat and rubber boots rushed to the business without a prescription. The elderly cleaning lady barely had time to move the bucket out of the way. "Where are you going?" The visitors looked at the woman confusedly, but said nothing. But Aunt Miranda didn't miss the opportunity to get wise. They're running around like crazy. They can't be bothered with the rain. This isn't a store called a bodega. It's a commercial pharmacy. I'd introduce special passes. It'd be a real, orderly place. Jenna appeared behind a tall glass partition. "Aunt Miranda, you're scaring all our customers with your reasoning. If we put a security check in place, you and I will be out of a paycheck." Jenna, only a few months out of medical school, held herself as if she had at least 5 years of practical experience. She turned to the man with the water streaming down her arm. "Listening to you," the customer began inarticulately to explain to the girl the problem for which he had ventured out of the house in such a downpour. Then he took a wet piece of paper out of his pocket and stuck it in the window. "I was told it would help." Jenna grimaced, but took the piece of paper with 2 fingers. "Man, this drug is available by prescription only. Go to the clinic. Let the doctor write you a prescription." The cleaning lady was already preparing to clean up the newly formed puddle from the coffee floor. But the man was still standing at the window. He was desperate. "Young lady, is there any substitute? This medicine is not for me. It's for my mother. She doesn't walk." The girl was annoyed with the client, and she answered him in a raised intonation. "And there are rules of release, medications, and I must comply with them. Are you advised to call a cab to take your mom to a medical facility or doctor's home? Call one." The man raised his voice too. "So he was our district doctor today and left this paper. He said he had run out of forms." The young woman blushed. "Man, unfortunately, I can't help you. It's a prescription drug." Aunt Miranda was already there. Wanted to escort the pushy little man out. But Betty, the pharmacist, showed up in the sales room. She gave Jenna an expressive look and then turned to the man who was ready to cry. "Please don't worry, we'll try to solve your problem." The visitor began to emotionally explain the essence of his problem. She listened to him very attentively. When the man spoke out in the same pacifying, strong voice, she said, "We will try to help you in your situation. I can recommend you this remedy." The woman took out a small package from the showcase and handed it to the buyer. "The drug has a similar effect, is available without a prescription, and is inexpensive." The man took the medicine and asked with hope in his voice, "And it will help my mom?" "If everything is as you described, it should help. Although the composition is slightly different, but still try to consult your doctor." The man paid and hurriedly left the pharmacy. Aunt Miranda looked at Jenna condescendingly. "If you talk to customers like that, we'll get complaints. This is a pharmacy, not a vegetable store." Miranda was very pleased with herself. She grabbed the mop with excitement, but Jenna spoiled her mood a little. "Aunt Miranda, you're wrong." She even stopped breathing. "Betty, what's wrong with me, Betty? Listen to you." "So it's okay to be rude to customers at the vegetable store." The elderly worker was embarrassed. It was not hard to guess from her tense face how hard her brain was working. Betty took pity on the unfortunate woman. He gave her a friendly pat on the shoulder. "Don't take offense, Miranda. I didn't mean any offense. You're doing a great job, but even a good worker can't stoop to rudeness. That's true of any service area." Jenna headed for the storage section, which the pharmacy staff called the warehouse. Aunt Miranda was still under the impression of words. A smart woman and would never raise her voice. Jenna, with obvious arrogance, remarked Aunt Miranda, "If you had learned in your time, you wouldn't have to mop the floors now." The cleaning lady responded instantly to the girl's outburst. "I lived in a country where any labor was honored. And I finished technical school, as you put it at the time, and worked at a large enterprise. Then the innovators came in and closed the fucking doors. so I had to take a rag in my hands. But I'm not offended by fate because I don't consider my work a humiliation. Somebody has to clean up too. Miranda began to scrub the floor with exasperation for the second time that day. Jenna watched her through the glass with a smirk on her face. By lunchtime, the rain had stopped, but there were no more customers. So Aunt Miranda decided to take a little break. She sat down on a couch designed for the convenience of visitors and fell asleep unnoticed. But the cleaner did not have time to relax completely because she was brought back to reality by the voice of the manager. "Girls, I'm running away to the meeting. In my absence, you can a little. You outrage, but do not get too carried away." Lutalgo assessed the situation in the hall and then turned to the young employee. "Jenna, you are very lucky. Betty is an expert. She's one of our best. By the way, it's her birthday today, if I'm not mistaken." And with the warehouse door open, Jenna's voice was heard. "Christina, you have a phenomenal memory. How do you keep everything in your head?" The boss was flattered by the praise, as evidenced by her smile. "I've had this ability since childhood. I solved all the problems in my mind at school. Okay, girls, I'm off. You can have tea, but everything within the bounds of propriety." Jenna has assured the management. "Christina, you know you know me, Betty, and I appreciate it. I'll tell you in confidence that I recommended you for my position." Jenna was surprised. "Are you leaving us? Maybe I'll get a promotion soon, but it's too early to beat the drums. So please do not spread this information." It was noticeable that the manager had just recently learned about the probable changes in her career, and joy overflowed her. She waved goodbye once more and disappeared behind the door. Miranda headed for the back room. "I'm going to put the kettle on and I'll run to the store for a cake." Jenna left her cloak and followed her boss out into the street. Jenna saw how she stopped the loot when she was getting into the car and said something to her. The supervisor, listening to her, nodded her head. The girl moved away from the window, but the unpleasant thought did not leave her head. It's like this everywhere, at home and at college. Now everyone here teaches, thinks they're the smartest. And this aunt makes a Plato out of herself, but she's a Chechen. Jenna didn't seem to know what class and species this Chechen belonged to. She put everyone who looked gray and shabby and dressed primitively into this group. Betty had no idea that her young colleague had already managed to categorize her. She returned from the store with a dressed-up box and cheerfully said to the girl Jenna, "While we have a lull, let's cover the doors for 15 minutes will do." The girl put up a sign, closed for technical reasons, and walked to a room where the staff could take a break and change. Miranda had already managed to set the table and was waiting for the kettle to boil to brighten up those minutes. She decided to talk about her previous place of employment. "Before you, I did floors in the prosecutor's office. At first, it was scary to even go into that office, but gradually I got used to it. We often treated her there together, and I want to say that the people working there are normal. True, they never talked business in front of me, and they never left me alone in the offices." Jenna drew the cake. No surprise there. Increased security measures are never unnecessary. By the way, the pharmacy should have the same strictest rules. That's what they told us in college. Jenna gave the girl a quick glance. That's right. Every business has its rules. The kettle's electrode boiled. "Did you, Miranda, unplug the appliance? Girls are boring. We're on a theme. On your birthday, you're supposed to sing songs and have fun." An old woman sang "and happy birthday" to love to the point of giddiness. What's new? Mood, the old lady's impromptu, and got Jenna excited. "Aunt Miranda, you're a sweetheart." Betty also thanked the woman for her extraordinary greeting, unexpected and very nice. "Thank you, Miranda's treat. The three of us need to destroy this cake." Miranda winked at Jenna. "That's not gonna be the end of it. I've had a sweet tooth since I was a kid. I've had such a good figure." The woman stroked her rounded sides and continued, "Sweets, like love, always want to repeat." Jenna laughed. "I didn't think that at this age people think about love relationships. My girl, age is no barrier to that. Take my husband, for example. He'll be 70 soon, and he's still thinking about it. In the spring, he'll be ripe. He's looking at girls in short skirts racing. When he was younger, He used to make such races that I had to use physical force. He once had an affair with a cashier at our store, and they had nowhere to meet. So he decided to turn the garage into a date spot. I was sniffing about that. Aunt Miranda threw herself on the back of a chair and burst out laughing. Benjamin and Jeannie waited patiently for the story to continue. When the fit of laughter passed, the cleaning lady wiped her tears with her hand. I'm laughing now, but I didn't laugh then. I caught them at the most crucial moment. My eyes went black and I was pounding. I learned later, when I started working in the prosecutor's office, that it's called affect. Jenna thought it was. Aunt Miranda looked at the girl in amazement. It would have been a lot to take in, but it was a good lesson. I grabbed the first iron in my hands and went to the cashier. And she was like a beast, counting in her own voice. And into the street. It was still light. And the men in the neighboring garages were fixing their cars. They saw a slightly dressed woman running and didn't understand anything at first. Then my family jumped out. I drove him all the way up the driveway like that. I only let the iron out of my hands in the apartment. The next morning, I wanted to put it away. I couldn't. The thing was too heavy. I still wonder how I could run more than a kilometer with it. Jenna's eyes were burning with curiosity. Aunt Miranda, what about your husband? How's he doing? He didn't. For a long time. I discouraged him from going left with his eyes. He still does it now, but he's less afraid of getting angry. Miranda took a breath. We're going in the wrong direction, Betty. On this day, from the bottom of my heart, I want to wish you love and happiness, so that you never have to wrestle your husband from the clutches of an evil student. I'm kidding, of course. A woman like you, Betty, and a husband like you have an exemplary husband. Jenna thanked the woman profusely for her wishes. But Aunt Miranda's story had been on her mind all day. She tried to imagine herself in Miranda's shoes, but her imagination refused to work in that direction, and the inner voice persistently advised her not to make a big deal out of herself. Nick had never once given you any reason to suspect him of cheating. So the cleaning lady is right. He's a model husband. Psychologists say that people quickly get used to a certain way of life. Betty valued the comfort and peace of home more than anything else. After work, she hurried home to be in the familiar comfort of a tea party in the company of women, and she wanted to share this warmth with her husband. On her way home, she stopped by the store, where she spent a decent amount of money. Though this fact made the woman a little embarrassed. She mentally reassured herself, it's okay, it's a day. Births only come once a year, so my wastefulness is justified. I will cook a delicious dinner and have a romantic evening for myself and Nick. With the same mood, the woman opened the apartment door, but immediately froze with surprise, because incredible aromas were coming from the kitchen. She whispered "Robber" ahead of me. Betty threw off her boots and looked for her slippers, but they weren't there. Nick, what kind of joke is this? I mean, my slippers back home. But instead of my husband, Kate came out of the kitchen. Mom, Olechka, happy birthday. And I decided to give you and Daddy a little surprise. I hope I succeeded. Kate ran up, clutching her in her arms. And Betty started begging her daughter crazy, let go. I didn't expect you to be on edge today, the girl remarked contentedly. So the surprise was a success. I've decided to commit to cooking dinner. I hope you, not offended by my self-indulgence, will not be offended. But how did you manage to get away in the middle of the week? You said you had midterms coming up and little time to prepare. Betty followed her daughter into the kitchen and looked around the room. Kate noticed her mother's confused look and tried to reassure her. I made a little mess, but I'll fix it, I promise. And my sudden appearance in the house is very simple. I took a week off. I could tell by the look in the woman's daughter's eyes that she was lying. Kate, spit it out. Your eyes always let you down. The girl again smacked, but to break and in a guilty voice said the mother. How do you manage to reveal everything on the fly? Well, yes, I a little bit tricked, pretended to be sick, but it's all for a higher purpose. I wanted to make you happy. Betty turned from anger to grace. Oh, thank you. Did you make it? Well, I got a congratulations at work today, too. Aunt Miranda, the janitor, even sang for the occasion. You see, there are times in life when you have to change the rules. These moments are called exceptions. Make sure your adventure doesn't have dire consequences. Mom, I'm not a dumb chicken. I'll have an exculpatory document. That is, a certificate from the clinic. Oh, I almost forgot. I have a present for you. Kate ran out into the hallway, but came right back in. She handed her mother a small sack tied in red. Mammy, this is not an easy sack. The girl untied the letter and took out a souvenir. I bought this thing from a woman in the market. She told me it's a strong amulet for the house. Let's find a cozy place for it together. Betty liked her daughter's gift very much, and with childlike enthusiasm, she began to look for a suitable place for the souvenir. Kate, I think the woman placed the gift on a small shelf above the dining room table. Kate approved of the choice. Awesome. The process of cooking dinner went unchecked, and the pleasant aroma overpowered the noxious smell of burning. Kate rushed to the stove. Well, all my efforts are for naught. The girl's voice sounded desperate, and tears came to her eyes. Betty was surprised at such a reaction. Xuxia should not be so upset. Now you and I will fix everything. The mother took the reins of the cooking process into her own hands, and the daughter did not resist it. She obeyed Betty's commands, but her mood dropped noticeably when dinner was almost ready. The girl guided her mother's neck with her hands. Mommy, I'm sorry. What happened? I was trying to do the best I could, and I don't know why I'm so bad at it. There was a note of despair in the girl's voice again, which surprised Kate's mother. There's no need to weep over every little thing. Was it the spoiled dinner that upset you so much? Or is there another reason for your tears? The girl wiped her tears and smiled crookedly. No, don't worry. I'm doing fine. She felt in her heart that her daughter had lied to her again. But she didn't pester her with questions, she thought. Kate will be 20 soon. Why would I interfere in her life? She'll want to ask for help herself. The thought had crossed her mind more than once. The first time it pricked, motherly heart. When Kate announced her decision to apply to a university in the capital, her parents hoped that their daughter would study in her hometown, where there were plenty of educational institutions. But Kate persisted. Dear parents, stop patronizing me. I'm not a little girl anymore, and I have every right to dispose of my life. Even birds and animals let their babies go free when the time comes. Nick was impressed by this comparison and agreed with his daughter. Okay, Mom and I won't clip your wings, but remember that we're always here for you. Betty was not in agreement with her husband's stance, though. She remained silent. She didn't want to destroy Nick's authority in her daughter's eyes. But when they were alone, the woman unleashed a barrage of accusations on her husband. You want to appear to be a good sack, and do not think about the consequences. Our daughter is a child. She is not used to independent life and can do such wonders. Nick let his wife speak. Then he said, remember yourself at 17 if memory serves. At that tender age, you also ran away from home because you were aggravated by life in a provincial town. By the way, at 19, you were already married to me, so our Kate had a whole year to herself. If we take your example as a model, it was a fair point. Betty didn't argue with her husband. She couldn't get used to the fact that her daughter lived far away from home for a long time and called her every day. The passions died down a bit. Only a year after the departure of her daughter, Kate came on big holidays. She also spent her vacations at home, but the girl never talked about her personal life. Only once the mother asked, "Are you dating anyone?" The girl immediately withdrew and discreetly replied, "Mom, I was the first to tell you about the changes in my personal life. So far, I have no progress in this regard, because the main thing for me now is studying." With this explanation, the daughter made it clear that further questioning was pointless. Many times, Betty broke through to break this unspoken ban. On the day of her birthday, she tried her hand at it too. When the festive table was set and they sat down to eat, Mother said sadly, "The day has come." But nothing terrible seemed to have happened. Kate furrowed her eyebrows in surprise. "Mom, what are you talking about? About dates? They say that after the age of 40, life starts to go downhill. It turns out I'm on a countdown starting today." "Mom, stop it. You're my youngest and prettiest. 40 is your prime. There's so much more you can do with your life." Betty picked up on it on the fly. "And what can I do that's so useful when you're all grown up?" It's all right, Mama, just be patient. There may be something for you to do very soon. Kate, you intrigue me. Tell me what you've been up to. The girl is blushing. I may be getting married soon. That's all I can tell you for now. At least tell me the name of your chosen one. Who is he? What does he do? Betty worried as if she were the one who was going to be married, not her daughter. But Kate deliberately delayed her answer. Only after a second question did she reluctantly give away her secret, his name Max. Preventing further questions, I will say that he is from the locals. But we study at the same institute. That's it. No more questions. All right, let's have dinner. I'm starving. Betty looked at the clock, which flowed peacefully on the wall next to the stick on which the souvenir already carried its watch. It's almost 8. I wonder where our father has disappeared to. Kate told me. You should call him for sure. I'm a little slow today, probably from an excess of joyful feelings. The woman dialed a familiar number, but no one answered. She grappled with the first explanation she could come up with. It must be a bad connection. Daddy's often sent out into the middle of nowhere where the connection is bad. Interesting facts I'm learning. How often does he have to recycle? I mean, it's 8 o'clock. All normal people stay home and watch TV. Kate, you know Dad. He thinks it's his duty to interfere with everything that concerns his work. Kate smirked. I'd agree with you if he worked in the mayor's office or the prosecutor's office. But what special business could an ordinary engineer at a woodworking company have? Betty wouldn't give up. It's responsible manufacturing, too. Dad said they'd almost doubled the number of customers lately, so he had to keep his head spinning. He's often late. Daughter, he grumbled on the day you were born. He could have shown up on time. I think we're waiting for him for nothing. The mood finally sank, and Betty said wistfully, perhaps it really is the daughter. There's no point in waiting for Daddy. Let's have dinner. The solemnity of the moment was gone. That's why the bottle of French champagne never appeared on the table. Mother and daughter ate in silence, and each was thinking about her own thoughts. Kate refused the sweet dessert and went straight to her room. You won't hurt Mommy if I leave you alone. Betty replied in a dull voice. What kind of silly questions are these? Are you tired from the road? Go and rest. I'll do the dishes myself, I think. The clock showed 9:45 p.m. when she realized that there was no point in waiting for her husband anymore. All sorts of thoughts were wandering in her head. So the woman birthed for a long time before falling into a restless sleep, woken by the pungent smell of booze. Her husband was sleeping serenely and a blissful smile was frozen on his face. Resentment came over her head again. He forgot my birthday. He hadn't even bothered to congratulate me on the phone. Of course, my husband has better things to do, and his partners are closer to him than his own wife. She wanted to wake Nick up and confront him. She pulled her pillow from under his head, hoping her husband would wake up. But the man mumbled something unintelligible and rolled over onto his other side. Betty left the bedroom and spent the rest of the night on the couch in the living room. She thought about the fact that her house had been a warming bowl for years. Yesterday, that vessel had given its first crack. The awakening was painful, and for several minutes, Nick hesitated to open his eyes. The events of last night flashed in fragmentary episodes, and the man cursed half-heartedly. We shouldn't have had so much to drink. Now I'll suffer. With a tremendous effort, Willie forced himself to rise from behind the cloudy gaze. Immediately, he stared at the electronic clock that was calculating the time on the nightstand. Damn it, it's almost 8:30. I'll be hung by one spot if I'm late. Nick is not an accident. In the first minutes after waking up, I remembered Martin. The mere name of this man gave most of the workers of the woodworking mill a temporary shiver. Some feared him, while others secretly hated their feelings. Both had to hide as they were afraid of losing their well-paying jobs. Only Benjamin could talk to the owner of the company on equal terms. Martin highly appreciated the merits of the chief engineer, who was the author of several rationalization proposals. For this, Bacco rewarded Nick with a ruble and at the same time noted with pleasure, "You have a bright head, Nick, but remember that if you sell everything to your competitors, you will be in trouble." Martin said all this in all seriousness, and then, after a short pause, burst out laughing. Yeah, I'm kidding. Thrash, soap operas, face. At first, Jenna was confused by this either praise or warning. But over time, he got used to his employer's unorthodox remarks. By the way, Martin also often visited Light Thoughts. Yesterday, on this very occasion, the businessman covered a glade for especially close persons. The evening was a free-for-all at Martin's country estate, but especially Jenna remembered, although he was quite tipsy. The final part involving the girls, Nick does not remember who delivered him home. His memory is only firmly carved from the word, or rather a sentence, which he voiced at the very beginning of the banquet. If you obey me, I'll appoint you director of a new factory. You may have heard I'm going to buy the workshops. The owner is practically bankrupt and is giving me the space for nothing. I've had an idea that's been on my mind for a while. I want to start manufacturing popular building materials. I've already ordered the equipment. Martin spent another 5 minutes talking about the prospects of his business. But in Nick's head, the system formed the thought, I will be the director of the new factory. This thought did not leave him. Throughout the evening, it warmed his heart even when he secluded himself with a strange girl in one of the rooms of Martin's palace. Nick shook his head determinedly, which helped bring him back from the previous evening to the present day. Only then did he notice the absence of a pillow on the neighboring half of the bed. This fact surprised the man, and he called out to his spouse in a husky voice, "Betty," but his faint call went unanswered. Present in the apartment silence, the man realized that his wife had already managed to run away to work. Charcot still in gait, he headed for the kitchen, where he volleyed away a whole bottle of kefir. Relief came almost instantly, and Nick decided to move on to the next phase of rapid sobering up. But the bathroom turned out to be locked from the inside. He knocked timidly. "Betty, you haven't left yet. Since when did you start locking yourself out?" The door swung open immediately. "Dad, Mom's been at work for a long time. And you're definitely going to be late today." The man stuttered in surprise. "Kate, what the hell are you doing here?" The girl slipped past the pop. Unlike some from my memory, did not blow out important information. Nick was puzzled by that statement. "Daughter, have I forgotten something? I'll remind you, if it's not too much trouble." "Yeah, Dad, your memory's a little fuzzy. Yesterday was Mom's birthday. It was her 40th birthday, by the way. She and I cooked a birthday dinner. We waited up till the middle of the night for you. Mom dialed you, but the phone was disconnected." Her daughter spoke to him in an inappropriate tone, and it angered the head of the family. "You shouldn't blame me, Kate. First of all, people say you can't celebrate your 40th birthday. And secondly, why do you talk to your father like that?" The girl smirked. "You don't like my tone. Fine, I'll keep my mouth shut. But when it's your birthday, I'll accidentally forget too. I don't really want you to feel what Mom felt yesterday." Kate slammed the door, making it clear that she didn't want to talk to her father anymore. Nick looked at the clock again and realized that he had no time left for a shower and breakfast. He had to limit himself to washing up and brushing his teeth. Trouble. Morning. To brighten Martin's absence a little, so his slight tardiness went unnoticed. Benjamin quickly got into work and no longer kept track of the time. On his way home, he stopped at a flower store. A young girl greeted him with a friendly smile. "Do you want a bouquet for your mom or for your girlfriend?" Benjamin cheerfully replied, "Advise which is more suitable for atonement of sins." The girl's eyelashes fluttered. "Oh, that's the first time I've heard such a request. But I think this floral arrangement fits your request." A luxurious bouquet of tea-colored roses cost the man a fortune. But he was sure that Betty would appreciate his efforts and forgive his forgetfulness. But his wife didn't want to accept the flowers from him. She said with a sneer, "Give this bouquet to the one you had fun with yesterday." This answer dumbfounded the man, and he left the flowers on the table, advising her to put the flowers in water. "I paid for this bouquet as much as it would cost for a dinner in a good restaurant to appreciate my husband's attention." Instead of the expected kiss, the woman scornfully repeated your gift inappropriately. To confirm her words, Betty carelessly waved the flowers at the bouquet, landing near the giver's feet. Trying to control his emotions, Nick picked up the flowers and looked reproachfully at his wife. "I admit I'm sorry, but the flowers had nothing to do with it." The woman defiantly turned away, and Benjamin realized that his wife didn't want to talk to him. Good, Betty relieved herself of her presence. The man picked up the bouquet and shouted already from the hallway without me. Nick felt insulted in his soul. Cola was rolling a volcano, and we bumped into each other. Why'd she make a big deal out of it? She's showing some character. Well, I'm gonna prove to you that I'm still worth something too. To ease the tension, the man went to the first bar he could find. After the initial portion of drink, he was a little released, and his thoughts were lined up in an even line. But the man did not have time to develop a strategy for further actions. He was interrupted by a slender blonde with huge brown eyes. The girl slowly approached the bar and left him with a languid look. I hope I'm not interrupting. Nick, do I know you? Benjamin stared at the blonde, trying to remember where he might have seen her. There was no doubt that they had met before, but he couldn't remember under what circumstances the acquaintance had taken place. The maiden was watching him, putting her lips prettily to her cocktail glass. She clearly enjoyed the man's confusion only completely, and putting the sushi in the glass she had practiced to perfection, she flipped her hair back and, in a heartfelt voice, informed Nick. I'm Kathy, Martin's daughter. You may have seen me at Daddy's factory. I've had the honor of being there a few times. It's just that I was wearing simple jeans and a t-shirt. My hair was different too. The man was glad for the clue. Oh, how do I remember? Were you still interested in the new composite tiles? Yes, I really liked the unconventional color. I generally love anything unusual, and I like that in men too. Kathy lowered her eyes, and Nick admired her delicate features. He liked this mysterious girl more and more with every passing minute, and his voice was hoarse with excitement. He asked, "Let me buy you a drink, Kathy. I can't when it's so official." Kathy's eyes rounded expressively again. Nick, are you ashamed to talk about your age? How old are you? 40. I'll be 45 soon. That's a man's prime. I'll be 30 soon. Don't look at me like that. Yeah, I know women don't like to give out their passport information. I'm not gonna hide my age because it's stupid and ridiculous. He felt pleasantly dizzy from the drink, and the eyes of this extraordinary girl had a moment when he acutely wanted to surprise her with a daring act. But since nothing suitable came to mind, Nick remembered about the bouquet, which was waiting for its fate on a neighboring chair. He grabbed the flowers and, on one knee, held out the bouquet to Kathy. I can't talk pretty, but you're as lovely as these tea roses. The girl was thrilled at the recognition. Nick, you are super. You're the first man who's ever really surprised me. I'll let you order. Another cocktail for me. They sat in the bar until midnight, and Kathy was pretty drunk. He had to call a cab to evacuate the girl from the lost establishment. He got home at 2 o'clock in the morning. Trying not to make any noise, the man headed for the bedroom, but he was stopped by his daughter's voice. Daddy, Mom put you on the couch, she said, and she's not going to breathe the vapors of your libations one more night. I totally understand her. Kate laid it all out in a loud whisper and at the end added, How long were you out for? Not hiding his irritation, he replied, Not enough for you to make such remarks to me. I'm an adult and I do what I think is right. Kate snarled, Yeah, I don't really care how crazy you guys get around here. It's just that I have to leave early tomorrow morning. I was going to ask you to drive me to the train station. That's different. You can ask Daddy for things, but you can't tell him what to do. All right, kitten. If you'll take me early tomorrow, my daughter kicked me out to her room. And Nick began to get comfortable on the couch. Before falling into sleep, he remembered the previous evening and Kathy. Engrossed in pleasant thoughts, he did not notice how he burst out. I'd do anything for a girl like that. Realizing that he had made a mistake, the man even stopped breathing. But soon he realized that no one had heard his enthusiastic cry. Betty had gotten up early on purpose so that she could make provisions for Kate. The pharmacy opened at 8 o'clock, so she couldn't be late. Her husband was still asleep after his walk, so she walked silently past the couch. The most surprising thing was that she felt absolutely no emotion. It was the first time such a thing had happened to her, and a bad thought burned her consciousness. Had we grown so sick of each other in these 20 years that we didn't care about anything? That question hung in the kitchen space because the unhappy housewives were interrupted by the arrival of her husband. Hi. Packing was in full swing. Nick was in good spirits and spoke as if it wasn't her ruined birthday, so as not to exacerbate the already heated atmosphere in the house. Betty indifferently replied, as you can see, "Gathering provisions. I hope you'll give Ikatha some money. My paycheck isn't until the end of the week." "Okay, I'll just check how much cash I have." The man rushed to the bedroom, but remembered that he had spent the night in a hotel. This fact caused a new surge of irritation. He muttered angrily, "I feel like a dog, thrown out on the street by the owners. I heard from the kitchen. Did you say something you heard?" He returned to the kitchen and handed his wife some bills. Hopefully, that would be enough for a third-year student. Betty put the money away in her desk drawer and asked with a sneer why such a tone this morning, or was last night not a success? On the contrary, it was great. I didn't even want to go home. I don't know why I deserve to be treated this way, and I warn you that I don't like sleeping on the couch. The woman parried, "I don't like to breathe your booze." Nick wanted to remind his wife that she lives in the apartment, which he inherited from his grandmother. Moreover, this real estate is not subject to division, because the grandmother still in her lifetime has formalized a gift. Spread on this topic, the man did not, because he did not want to add dry wood to the fire of a family scandal to at least somehow smooth out the awkward situation. He asked, "You will come with us, or without you the pharmacy cannot work." "I'm not going. I don't want us to have a fight at the train station." Betty didn't even look at him. She deftly packed and travel bagged Katie's daughter's luggage, is ready and go have breakfast before the road. "And I should be going now." Betty walked past her husband, who continued to stand plastered in the middle of the kitchen. She bade her daughter a hasty farewell in the hallway. Soon the door slammed behind her. Nick involuntarily ate comfortably, as if he had been blown away by an icy wind. He realized that the family hearth, in which he and his wife had kept the fire burning for more than 2 decades, began to cool rapidly. It was still possible to stop this process, but he did not want to. They arrived at the train station only a few minutes before the train left. Kate was afraid of being late. From this, even more fussed. As a pity, a decent queue formed near the ticket office, which led the girl into confusion. "Dad, if I'm late, I'll be in huge trouble. I should have left yesterday, but you and Mom are in a mess. So I decided to stay a day." Nick reassured his daughter not to come in. Kate snarled, "Yeah, I don't really care how crazy you guys get around here. It's just that I have to leave early tomorrow morning. I was going to ask you to drive me to the train station. That's different. You can ask Daddy for things, but you can't tell him what to do." "All right, kitten. If you'll take me early tomorrow, my daughter kicked me out to her room." And Nick began to get comfortable on the couch. Before falling into sleep, he remembered the previous evening and Kathy. Engrossed in pleasant thoughts, he did not notice how he burst out, "I'd do anything for a girl like that." Realizing that he had made a mistake, the man even stopped breathing. But soon he realized that no one had heard his enthusiastic cry. Betty had gotten up early on purpose so that she could make provisions for Kate. The pharmacy opened at 8 o'clock, so she couldn't be late. Her husband was still asleep after his walk, so she walked silently past the couch. The most surprising thing was that she felt absolutely no emotion. It was the first time such a thing had happened to her, and a bad thought burned her consciousness. Had we grown so sick of each other in these 20 years that we didn't care about anything? That question hung in the kitchen space, because the unhappy housewives were interrupted by the arrival of her husband. Hi. Packing was in full swing. Nick was in good spirits and spoke as if it wasn't her ruined birthday, so as not to exacerbate the already heated atmosphere in the house. Betty indifferently replied, "As you can see, gathering provisions. I hope you'll give Ikatha some money. My paycheck isn't until the end of the week." "Okay, I'll just check how much cash I have." The man rushed to the bedroom, but remembered that he had spent the night in a hotel. This fact caused a new surge of irritation. He muttered angrily, "I feel like a dog, thrown out on the street by the owners. I heard from the kitchen. Did you say something you heard?" He returned to the kitchen and handed his wife some bills. Hopefully, that would be enough for a third-year student. Betty put the money away in her desk drawer and asked with a sneer why such a tone this morning, or was last night not a success? On the contrary, it was great. I didn't even want to go home. I don't know why I deserve to be treated this way, and I warn you that I don't like sleeping on the couch. The woman parried, I don't like to breathe your booze. Nick wanted to remind his wife that she lives in the apartment, which he inherited from his grandmother. Moreover, this real estate is not subject to division, because the grandmother still in her lifetime has formalized a gift. Spread on this topic, the man did not, because he did not want to add dry wood to the fire of a family scandal to at least somehow smooth out the awkward situation. He asked, "You will come with us, or without you the pharmacy cannot work." "I'm not going. I don't want us to have a fight at the train station." Betty didn't even look at him. She deftly packed and travel bag Katie's daughter's luggage, is ready and go have breakfast before the road. "And I should be going now." Betty walked past her husband, who continued to stand plastered in the middle of the kitchen. She bade her daughter a hasty farewell in the hallway. Soon the door slammed behind her. Nick involuntarily ate comfortably, as if he had been blown away by an icy wind. He realized that the family hearth, in which he and his wife had kept the fire burning for more than 2 decades, began to cool rapidly. It was still possible to stop this process, but he did not want to. They arrived at the train station only a few minutes before the train left. Kate was afraid of being late. From this, even more fussed. As a pity, a decent queue formed near the ticket office, which led the girl into confusion. "Dad, if I'm late, I'll be in huge trouble. I should have left yesterday, but you and Mom are in a mess. So I decided to stay a day." Nick reassured his daughter not to come in. "I'm getting along now." The man disappeared behind a door labeled duty, but a minute later he appeared with a ticket in his hands. It's good to have useful acquaintances. Got a seat in a compartment in the car Kate ran, or the boarding will be over soon. The attendants were crowding on the platform, and Nick did not immediately notice Kathy, with whom he had spent a wonderful evening last night, but the girl did not see him. She stood a little farther away from the boarding place and smiled sweetly at someone who was already in the car. At that moment, the train jerked. Kate literally jumped into the carriage. "Daddy, throw the bag." To fulfill his daughter's request, he had to run a bit. Kate waved at him for a long time and sent air kisses. The man tried to seem cheerful, but he was uneasy and looked sadly at the fleeing train for a long time. Nick must have been in a state of prostration for several minutes, but he was called by a familiar female voice. "Nick, you're all right." Kathy looked at him and smiled. The closeness of this girl, especially her languid gaze, made the man's heart beat more often. "Thank you, I'm fine. Just a little sad. I was seeing my daughter off. She's studying in the capital." "Were you seeing someone off too?" Is the girl embarrassed? "Yes, I just happened to be here by chance. I was supposed to meet someone here, but he called and canceled. So I got nothing, I guess you could say." Coming home, a blush on my cheeks and running eyes. Nick realized that the girl wasn't telling the truth. He didn't bother to question her, who she was saying goodbye to so sweetly at the carriage window. He volunteered to give her a ride, and the girl gladly accepted his offer. At these moments, another unexpected encounter took place. Barely had Kate entered the wagon, the first person she saw was Max. The surprise was so strong that the girl let go of her heavy yet Laza bag's something loud read, but she did not even pay attention to this suspicious sound. "Max, how did you get here? You weren't supposed to go home." The young man was stunned by the encounter and blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "My folks had a little fight. I had to snap out of it." After a second, the guy came to his senses and asked Kate, "Are you trying to interrogate me?" "No, I was just asking. I didn't expect to see you here. Why are you so excited? Or is there a reason to hide the confusion?" The guy picked up the girl's bag, but this action turned out to be unpleasant for him. A dark, sticky mass splattered through the dense materials onto his pants. The guy screamed at the whole carriage. "Shit, what the hell is this stuff?" The girl laughed. "Max, don't be scared. It's not what you think it is. It's just jam. Mammy put jars in my bag, and apparently it broke. I've got to get that bag sorted out right away. By the way, You and I have a month's worth of provisions in there. Kate, did you at least tell me the can broke? I knew you grabbed the damn bag and went bankrupt. There's no disaster. We're gonna fix it. Give me your pants. We gotta do it while the stain's still fresh. Max glared angrily. I can take care of my own pants. Why are you trying to do everything for me? Please don't impose your services on me. And a female conductor appeared in the service compartment. Citizens, passengers, take your seats according to the tickets you bought. Max patted Ketu on the shoulder. Girl, go to your compartment and your bag. Don't forget, without waiting for her reaction, the guy walked to the other end of the carriage. Katya had no other choice but to go to her compartment. Behind the bag stretched a fragrant trail, which was immediately noticed by the conductor. What is this? Who pooped here? The girl began to apologize. I'm sorry, what happened? It's jam. I'll clean it up. The conductor was not satisfied with this promise, and she continued her accusatory speech about everything in the car turned into a stable. At home, no one would allow such an outrage. But on public transportation, you can do whatever you want. Kate was still standing in the compartment doorway. Don't yell, please. I told you I'll clean it up. The aunt in the uniform teased. Of course you will. Otherwise, I'll call you at the first station. Give me your ticket before you cheer for your ticket purse. Kate looked over to where Max had just disappeared. He reappeared in the corridor of the carriage and watched with interest as the conductor reprimanded her. Soon, an unfamiliar guy came out of the same compartment, and the two of them and Max went into the vestibule. The conductor went on, and Kate began to clean up the consequences of her carelessness. The whole way, Kate tried to figure out why Max was being so rude to her. Had he really apologized for the ruined pants? Or was there another reason? As she pondered, she suddenly realized that the young man was offended by her sudden disappearance. She was afraid of missing the train and hadn't even left him a note. True, the next day she called him and told him that she was visiting her parents. They had a very nice talk, and he even promised to meet her in the capital, but for reasons unknown to her was in her hometown. Max's explanation immediately seemed cheesy to the girl because she did not notice the guy's parents at the train station. One cheerful house began to dizzy, and suddenly a bright thought struck the girl. Probably Max thought I had someone and secretly followed me. She felt sorry for the guy she had dreamed of as her husband. They dated for a year, and at the beginning of this school semester Max proposed to Kate. Let's live together. This proposal did not embarrass the girl, because many student couples started their lives together before going to the registry office. There were many advantages to living together without marriage, and the main one was the opportunity to get to know each other better. Kate trusted Max completely and gladly accepted his proposal. They rented a relatively inexpensive room in a dormitory district and immediately moved to a new place. Of course, Kate didn't tell her parents about the changes in her life. She was afraid that they would not understand her and spoil everything. The girl was sure that the day would come and Max would make her an official proposal. But so far no such intentions were visible from his side. Having made a detailed analysis of the last months of her personal life, Kate decided to make the first step towards reconciliation. She resolutely went to the opposite end of the car and knocked on the compartment where Max had settled down. You can hear from the compartment, come in. It's open. Kate expected one of the guys to open the door. But there was no movement in the compartment, so she had to do it herself. Max was lying on the bottom shelf with a book in his hands. He nodded at her and grumbled grudgingly, "You've got something urgent." His companion realized he was an extra and hopped out the door. "I'm going out for a smoke." "You're a girl, come on in." She went into the compartment and sat down on the edge of the shelf where Max was lying. The young man gave her a displeased look. "Kate, tell me, why this demonstration? Couldn't you have waited until you arrived at your destination? To be honest, I'm getting tired of all this." All the words prepared beforehand instantly flew out of the girl's head. She did not notice how tears flowed from her eyes. "Max, I haven't had time to say a word and you're already tired. I came because I want to apologize." "For what?" "For leaving without warning. That's why you're mad at me." The young man put the book aside and sat down with his hands on his knees. Kate, we're not in kindergarten. It's just that we've coexisted in the same space for a while, and it's been nice for both of us. But our cohabitation was originally meant to be a non-committal relationship. Therefore, no reciprocal claims. The girl was doused with heat, and she wanted to teleport from this compartment to anywhere, even to the wild jungle or Antarctica. Words of resentment stuck in her throat. She wanted to get up, but her whole body shook with a fine tremor. Max saw the state she was in. He didn't calm her down, but added more fire. Kate, I don't know what you've got in your pretty criminal mind, but my immediate plans don't include marriage. I'm not ready for that yet. Oh, and I want to give you a heads up that I'm moving out of my apartment. Things I'll pick up later well. The girl did not answer anything. Jumped out of the compartment from the station. She went straight to the hostel from which she had moved out only a couple months ago. She barely broke the commandant to allow her to reoccupy it. Did it take Andrew long to give up? I can't. Not without orders. Kate began to bribe the older man to rehouse you. Andrew, you're kind. I don't just have nowhere to go. I can't spend the night at the station for appearances' sake. The commandant grumbled some more. No discipline. They do what they want. All right, I talked her into moving into 115. There's a freshman living there. Andrew helped the girl drag her bag into the room, and she gave him apples in gratitude. What? Resolve the rent issue. Kate called the landlady, but she demanded money for the current month. She had to give almost everything her parents had given her. The only thing left to do was to get her things. Kate decided not to postpone that too. She remembered Max's request and whispered to herself to guard her cold ones. She packed only her belongings that fit in one bag. Max was used to living comfortably, so he had a lot more belongings. Kate mentally imagined how he would move it all out of someone else's living quarters. She did not warn Max that she had left the rented accommodation. It wasn't until 2 days later that the young man made himself known. He called her cell phone between lectures and immediately started yelling, "I asked for you as a human being." Was it so hard to get my stuff? Kate calmly answered him, "I'm not your maid. And don't call again. I'm so bored with the squabbling." An affair that was supposed to end in marriage was over. Kate felt the separation from Max painfully. Especially she was hurt to realize that he did not take their relationship seriously. She did not tell anyone about the collapse of her first love, reassuring herself with nothing. Everything will soon settle down. But I gained useful experience. It's good that I haven't called all over the village. I'm getting married. But I won't fall into that trap again. Everywhere hovered the New Year mood and smelled strongly of sickness to keep up with other organizations in the city. The pharmacy staff decided to get busy in the morning preparing for the upcoming holiday. Aunt Miranda voluntarily took charge of this process, and the role of the main performer went to Jenna, as she was the youngest in the team. Betty had never seen the pharmacy so lively before. No sooner had she entered the sales room than she was immediately involved in the process. Miranda stood in the center of the room in an exquisite voice and gave out commands. First, we will decorate the inside of the hall, and then we will hang the glowing stars on the windows. Betty, get dressed and get to work. You're in charge of decorations, Christmas trees, and Jen is going to be the top of the line. We're going to let her put up the rain. It was amusing to watch the cleaning lady in charge from the sidelines. Aunt Miranda's confident voice and the surrounding entourage filled Betty's heart with excitement and anticipation. She quickly changed her clothes and got down to her assigned task. The cleaning lady was pleased with the progress of the preparations. "Okay, gals, while you're running the place, have at it. I'll go look for the men." Jenna stood on a stepladder and by a string extracted from the package of multicolored glitter. "Aunt Miranda, what do you need men for? You can hang them somewhere too." The old woman shook her head vigorously. "Oh, young people, all you want is to be searched. Tell me, how did you hang this glowing thing on the windows without men's help?" The old woman nodded toward the brightly colored boxes with inscriptions in a foreign language. Jenna giggled again. "Aunt Miranda, it's not a thing, it's an illumination element. They sell a lot of that Chinese stuff nowadays. You can pick out anything you want." Miranda remarked snidely, and that was that. "You know," the girl snapped back, "not all of you to shine with knowledge. The superintendent appeared from her office. What's all the commotion? Miranda immediately changed her commanding tone to ingratiating. Oh, Christina, you can't imagine how hard it is to argue with young people. When I worked in the prosecutor's office, we had gas in our apartment. Here we go again. Jenna ruthlessly interrupted Aunt Dusha. Let's talk about something else. Lutogo threatened the girl with a finger. Jenna. Elders should be respected. The girl immediately replied, Christina, I don't mind. But you cannot impose your opinion on everyone and endlessly talk about working in the prosecutor's office. You get the impression that Aunt Miranda was in charge of everything there. I can see her sitting on the bench and looking out at the crowd. The superintendent laughed. Jenna, you have a vivid imagination. But it seems to me that our Miranda has nothing in common with the concept of pilot. I've been haunted by that analogy since my first day here. Aunt Miranda is an exact replica. It's a known historical figure. It's especially clear when she leans on her mop. The women laughed amicably, and at the same time, Aunt Miranda returned from her assignment. All my bones have been washed. These did not tire. Lutogo lightly put her arm around the cleaning lady's shoulders. Miranda, I don't know what we do without you. Don't take offense to the girls. They mean it from the bottom of their hearts. No offense taken, Christina. It's not like it's my fault. If the girls laugh a little when the mood is good and the work argues with the presence of the headmistress, spurred the enterprising cleaner, and she pounced on the youngest. Jenna, what are you talking about? Step it up. Move it. You're not even halfway done. Look at Betty Alexandrovna. She has a Christmas tree dressed up, and Ded Moros and Snegurovska are on full alert. We are now sculpting snowflakes for the windows with her. Jenna poked at the paper snowflakes again. Stupid primitive. Aunt Miranda countered. Don't spit on a classic of the genre. Snowflakes are a staple of the holiday season. I remember in kindergarten I cut such decorations from napkins. Jenna came in from laughter and almost fell off the stepladder. Oh, I can't. Aunt Miranda and kindergarten. I want to introduce you to the little one, but I can't. Laughter. The girls infected the others. The women laughed until they were exhausted, and none of them noticed a man in an expensive sheepskin coat enter the drugstore. He thundered and flip-flopped. Then he asked, Pardon me, I'm looking for Betty Starostina. The laughter stopped and the women looked at each other. Jenna took a step forward. Go ahead. Noticing the perplexed looks of her colleagues, she explained Betty, my maiden name. The visitor didn't introduce herself, but asked if there was somewhere we could talk without witnesses. Betty was confused. If only here, in the pharmacy, in the hall, the presence of strangers in the office is not allowed. Then the only option is my car. Don't worry, I won't keep you long. All right, I'll just go to the superintendent's office. Betty threw a fur coat over her shoulders and followed the man. Aunt Miranda and Jeannie stuck to the window and shared their curiosity. And the cleaning lady immediately began to put forward her versions of what was happening. The man looks like a lawyer. Maybe our provisor at Christmas got some money. Jenna said ironically, it's just like a fairy tale, you know, a windfall. Did you ever think, Miranda, that it could be more prosaic than that? Like an accident or an unpaid loan from the bank. Or maybe Betty decided to divorce her husband and his lawyer showed up to negotiate the terms. Aunt Miranda yelled at Jenna not to talk nonsense. I hear they have a model family and the daughter is in law school herself. And you know all that, Miranda. You should be a reporter. I cleaned the newsroom for a while too, only it was a long time ago and not for long. While the pharmacy employees were wondering why the lawyer-looking man Betty Jenna had a real shock in just a few minutes. As soon as she got into the car, the stranger briefly introduced himself as Anthony. I am your father's lawyer. The woman was instantly hit with a wave of the most unpleasant memories. She abruptly opened the car door. I'm sorry, but you and I have nothing to talk about. And please tell my father not to send any more messengers to me. I cut that man out of my life a long time ago, and I don't want to hear from him. She was ready to jump out of the car, but Anthony handed her an envelope. Betty, please don't be so quick to cut the last thread. Read this letter. Sebastian asked me to give it to you. Read it, and then decide for yourself what is the right thing to do. With hands shaking with excitement, the woman took the envelope and got out of the car. The lawyer called Betty to her. "Take my card. If you decide to call, I'm available at all hours of the day and night." The woman opened the envelope right on the street and read the short message, "Daughter, I am deeply guilty before you, and I know I deserve no pity. I have no hope of forgiveness, but still I have decided to make a request to you. I want to see you. It is time for me to atone for my sins, and this may be my last request. I hope you won't refuse me." Light snowflakes fell on the white sheet of paper and immediately melted, leaving wet traces. Betty reread the message from the past several times and didn't feel the unshed tears rolling down her cheeks. Those tears were Echo's old resentments. She remembered her father leaving home for good on a winter day like this. Betty, then 15 years old. On New Year's Eve, their school traditionally held a winter ball to choose a snow princess. Betty was the main contender for this title, so the whole family was preparing for the event. About a week before the holiday, her father took her to town. They were living in a small village in another part of the country at the time and said, "Daughter mine, I want you to be the star of the ball, but this wish will be fulfilled if we buy you the most luxurious dresses." Half a day they went shopping and were already exhausted. When they went down to the basement where designer clothes were sold, Betty immediately saw a dress that could be called a work of art. She couldn't take her eyes off the gorgeous piece, but when the salesman named the price, she felt sick to her stomach. Betty grabbed her father's hand and dragged him towards the exit. "Daddy, come on, we can't afford this dress. We'll find something simpler." They went outside. For a few minutes my father thought hard and then waved his hand. "I've been there. We only live once, daughter. I want you to remember your New Year's Eve ball for the rest of your life." Her father's words proved prophetic. Betty remembered that day forever. But she wasn't destined to be the star of the ball. Her parents promised their daughter support, including a personal presence at the event. The ball was to be held in the evening, and the women began preparing in the morning. They were in full parade when the head of the family, Sebastian, came home and looked at his daughter and wife in bewilderment. "Where are you dressed up like that?" Betty was surprised. "Daddy, you forgot today I have a ball at school and you and Mom promised." The man waved his hand tiredly. "Yes, I did, but I'm not going to make it. Betty, please come out for a moment. Mom and I need to talk about something." She left her parents alone, unaware that their family's fate was being decided behind the glass door. The conversation was short-lived, and soon her father opened the door and strode into the bedroom without paying attention to her. Betty rushed to her mother. "Mom, what's going on? Why doesn't Dad look like himself?" Mother didn't even move, and her glassy gaze was directed to an unknown point under the ceiling. The girl started shaking her. "Mom, wake up. What did Daddy say to you? You don't have a daddy anymore. He's leaving us." The mother's lips barely moved. Betty hardly realized what she was saying when the meaning of what she was saying came to her. She rushed into the hallway, where her father was already standing with a suitcase in his hand. Betty pounced on him and began beating her fists fiercely against his chest. "Daddy, why did you do that? Daughter, why did I spoil your mood? But I can't lie anymore. Will you ever understand me?" Maybe Sebastian wanted to kiss his daughter goodbye, but Betty threw it in his face. "Never, you hear me, never will I forgive you for betraying me." The father didn't say another word. He picked up his suitcase and left the apartment. Carefully shut the door behind him. Betty cried all evening. Most of all, she was hurt that her father had chosen to leave on such an important day for her. In desperation, she cut the dress in which she was to shine at the ball into small pieces. Betty, often thinking back to that day, thought that this is how dreams are shattered. Shortly after New Year's Eve, she and her mother sold their apartment and left the village. Their mother's aunt sheltered them for a while, but the relative had a lively temper, and they had to look for another place of residence. Thanks to Mom's profession, she was a doctor. They settled quite well in a small provincial town. There Betty finished school and entered the pharmacy faculty of the medical university. Her mother pulled her alone because she didn't want to accept help from her father, an aunt with a harmful temper. They found out he was looking for them. But her mother firmly said, "I will never forgive him." Betty decided to cut her father out of her life completely. After her mother's untimely death, she believed it was his fault her mother had left so early. She was only 45 years old. Betty was going through the worst loss of her life. But during this difficult period, she had a devoted friend and her beloved husband by her side. She married Nick Jenna when she was in university. But so far, she has never regretted it. Betty considered her spouse a paragon of male decency until recently. That was why everything that had been going on between them in recent months had bothered her greatly. Nick was experiencing the coming of a second youth. He had no idea that there was such passion in the world, which he was lucky enough to experience every time he met Kathy. His master's daughter had literally captivated him, but this captivity was like a sweet dream. All the man's thoughts were now occupied only with Kathy. He longed for her kisses. The man's imagination painted such pictures, such forthcoming encounters, that he had been ashamed of before. But for Kathy, there were no forbidden topics or activities. When he had first been struck by her boldness, the girl had said with a chuckle, "Nick, this is just the flowers. You'll be obedient. I'll let you taste the berries." The man never thought that at such a respectable age he would be obedient like a boy. But it did not stress him, on the contrary, energized him. Acquaintance with Kathy completely overturned his idea of the relationship between a woman and a man. Betty had always been reserved. She was shy to show openly her feelings. Of course, Nick had women, but none of the secret lovers could compare with Kathy. After only a few meetings, he told Kathy, "If you knew how much I hate to break up with you." "So what's the matter?" The man sighed. "You know I'm not free," Nick stated with his arms and his neck. "It's up to you. Fulfills a marriage obligation for the rest of your life. It's very boring and stupid. And then, as far as I know, your daughter is already quite capable of taking care of herself, and you've given your wife over 20 years of happiness, which is a long time." The man felt the closeness of the woman he loved, listening to her cooing voice. He fully agreed with Kathy that Betty should thank him for living with her for so many years, but he deserves a little bit of happiness too. And that's only possible with Kathy by his side. During a meeting just before New Year's Eve, Kathy had a mysterious look on her face. "Nick, I didn't want to tell you, but I'm getting impatient." He was shying away from the girl in his arms. "Confessing and rogue girls, what have you kept from me?" Kathy accepted the game and soon in a funny face said, "From you, it is impossible to hide anything, my lord. So I will tell you a terrible secret. You will soon be the director of the new factory." Although Martin himself had spoken several times about his desire to be promoted to the position of chief engineer, Nick considered his words to be empty talk. So Kathy's confession didn't surprise him much. Where did this information come from? The girl disappointedly pouted her lips. "I thought you were excited, and I'm excited honestly. But I'm sorry to be blunt, but your father's words are often at odds with deeds. He hinted in the fall that if I did well, he'd make me director of the new factory. I was even encouraged by that promise. But then I was told by a knowledgeable person that there was another candidate for the vacancy. Some young fellow, a graduate of the institute." The man noticed Kathy blushing. At these words, she began to wave her hands nervously. "Who do you believe, me or a dubious source? There is no graduate, and you would be the prime candidate for the position. If you want, I'll talk to my father." He pulled the girl to him. "I do, but most of all, I want you to always be by my side." Kathy made sly eyes. "That's a proposition. Yes, and I'll try to be free soon." The girl was getting excited. "Nick, I love you. I'm crazy about you too. You know, I've been thinking a long time, and I realized you're right. Why torture yourself? Why make yourself pretend to be a happy man? You can't tell your heart to love someone. It chooses." Nick has made a big decision. He realized that he was going to have an unpleasant conversation with his wife, but the desire to start a new life with Kathy gave him confidence in his heart. After a few days' thought, he decided to tell Betty. It was better to cut things off in one fell swoop than to pull the gum with the firm intention of putting a stop to his relationship with his wife. The man opened the apartment door and froze on the threshold because there were 2 fluff bins standing in the hallway. Nick blurted out, "What does that mean?" "Betty, we have someone coming to visit us." Betty appeared in the hallway, followed by Kate. "Hi, Daddy. I'm sorry, I haven't had time to talk to you. Mom and I are going away, but we'll be back in 2 or 3 days." The girl hurriedly poked her father's cheek. "By the way, can you give me and my mom a ride to the train station? You don't want to run after the train like that time." Betty had been silent the whole time, and Nick looked at her. "Maybe you could tell me where you're going." The woman answered reluctantly. "My relative invited us to visit. After the holidays, we will come right away. And you asked me." "Why do you ask? It's not like you're advising everything with me. You do what you think is right. I'm just following your lead." Betty took hold of the suitcase. "Are you taking us?" "Sure, I haven't had a chance to put the car in the garage yet." Nick took both bags and headed for the elevator. Kate was counting without closing her mouth in anticipation of the vivid impressions of the trip. "Dad, don't you realize how surreal this is? I get there, and Mom says to her daughter, 'Get ready. We're going to Grandpa's.' You know, I didn't know I had a grandfather." "Well, I did, because everyone has grandparents. But I thought my ancestor had been there for a long time." Kate raised her eyes upward and then looked at her father. "Really? That's great, Dad." The man muttered, "Probably great. Betty, why didn't you talk about your father before?" The woman again answered the question with a question to the question, "Why, Nick? Are you interested in what I do for a living and what Kate has? You've become very distant from us in the last few months." He suggested, "Let's not spoil each other's mood right now. We'll talk after the holidays." Boarding had already been announced, and they had to run to their car. Kate grumbled loudly, running again. "Normal people arrive in advance, and we jump on the train at the last minute or at all. They wouldn't let us on the plane for sure. The train was moving fast." Kate asked sadly, "Mom, do you feel sorry for him?" "For who?" "I see, Daddy, who?" Betty sat down tiredly by the window. "I don't know, Kate, and pity is not a good feeling. It's like weakness, and weak-willed people don't inspire respect." The girl sighed heavily. "Are you right? A weak person is very vulnerable." The mother laughed. "Daughter, you speak as if you have already experienced all earthly passions." Without taking her eyes off the window, Kate straight killed. "Not all, but many. For example, I recently learned what betrayal is." The girl spoke of it with pain, and Betty felt a prickling, invisible needles under her heart. She asked with involvement, "Max didn't live up to your expectations." The girl perked up. All these months, she had carried my pain unbearably within her, afraid to confide in even her closest friend. Her mother's sincere involvement prompted a desire to shed the weight. She cried as she told the closest person she had ever known about her sad experience. "I always considered him decent, almost the standard of a real man. I was courted by many guys, but I chose Max. We dated for a whole year and then decided to live together. I thought we'd get married, and Max hinted at it many times. But then things changed. He became rude and even aggressive. But I was stupid, naive. I didn't realize anything. I thought it was me. It was only later that I found out that Max was seeing someone else. You know, Mom, he left me for a gorgeous aunt who's 7 years older than him." "Max told you about this?" "No. First, a girl said she was in the same department with Max. And then Max confessed that he was falling in love with the daughter of a businessman. Like her dad promised him a job after college. In short, your Max traded you for a comfortable life. Then don't feel sorry for him. People like that will let you down sooner or later." Kate tried to smile at her mom. "I'm trying to forget him, but it's not working. You can't help what your heart tells you to do." "That's true, daughter. But don't despair. You have your whole life ahead of you, and you'll meet a worthy man. And the first experience, even a bad one, is useful in any case." Wheels, drains, and kilometers of track. And the two women sat at the carriage window, looking out into the snowy distance. It was as if they were trying to see a light of hope in the brain and darkness. All the way, Betty tried to mentally visualize the meeting with her father after so many years of separation. But the exertion gave her a headache and jumbled her thoughts even more. Then she decided to turn her mind to something else. "I'd rather think of something pleasant." However, there was a problem with this direction too. Because of all the pleasant events that had happened in recent months, Only work could be singled out. She remembered how they had decorated the drugstore with tinsel and garlands, and her heart immediately warmed. How much does it mean for a person and his environment favorable environment? I want to live and work. Probably that's why the pharmacy has become my second home. But the first one has recently become very uncomfortable. And how to correct the situation? I don't know yet. The woman herself did not notice how she fell asleep, woke her up by the loud cry of her daughter, "Mom, wake up. We're almost there." Betty felt as if she had been electrocuted. She jumped up and started frantically packing her things with precision. Kate laughed. "Mom, what did you pick up?" The woman grudgingly muttered, "You were yelling at the whole carriage that we'd arrived, weren't you?" "I was talking almost. We're here. Can you tell the difference?" Betty waved her daughter away with irritation. "Kate, you need to learn to talk normally. Honestly, I'm sick of this stuff." Betty mimed something incomprehensible with her fingers and turned away to the window. The girl sat down next to her. "Mommy, not Miranda. Sorry, rascals." The woman sighed heavily, and the daughter took it as a sign that her mother was no longer angry with her ingratiating voice. She asked Mom, wondering if anyone would meet us, or would we wander around looking for Grandpa Dom at home? "He probably lives in Canada, doesn't he?" Betty broke away from contemplating the winter scenery that flashed outside the window. "I don't know, daughter. I haven't seen my father since he left us, so I can't describe his home to you. But judging by the lawyer acting on Dad's behalf, he doesn't live too badly." To Betty's surprise, the familiar Anthony met them at the train station. However, this time the lawyer was wearing a coat, at the sight of which Kate quietly whispered to die and not get up. It was too siani Betty to pull Kate's daughter back. "You're acting like a bizarre aunt to us. Shut up. I'll behave myself. Just tell me who this guy is. By the way, he's almost a colleague of yours, your father's lawyer." At least that's how he introduced himself. Kate forgot her promise. "I don't think Grandpa is in a bar." Anthony turned around and looked at the girl with interest, but his speech sounded boring and monotonous. "Sebastian is quite a famous man in the business world, but lately he prefers to live in his country residence, where we are going at the moment." Suddenly, the man smiled and immediately became 10 years younger. This instantaneous transformation struck Betty Alexandrovna, and she thought how dramatically a person's appearance could change. Just one smile. When they got into the car, Anthony hesitantly said, "I should have warned you right away, but I did not think that you would so quickly decide to check on Sebastian. The thing is, he's seriously ill, so try to be gentle with him." "How much is that possible?" Betty asked him, so he decided to seek me out. "Not exactly. This is my 3rd year working for Sebastian, but I know he has made attempts to find you before. But as far as I know, my predecessor didn't try very hard. So it's to your credit then." The lawyer smiled again. "I really wanted to do something good for Sebastian. He's a wonderful man. People like him are rare. When I had problems in my family, he helped me a lot." Betty was again very surprised. "That's right. They say everything in this world is relative." Anthony understood her. "That's right. The same person acts differently depending on the circumstances. That is, in some cases he does good, and in others he hurts someone. A woman whispered a long time ago, 'My daddy hurt me and my mommy too.'" The lawyer heard what she said but remained silent. Kate, too, remained silent the whole way. But when the car stopped at the estate gate, she didn't hold back. "Wow, this is where my grandfather lives. That's quite a house." The way to the house was through a small park. Kate did not hide her admiration for the original design of this area. "Isn't it beautiful? I've only seen such beauty in glossy magazines." Sebastian greeted the guests at the front door. He hadn't changed much in a quarter of a century. Only his luxurious hair had changed a little, and she sat up when she saw him. Betty felt an intense excitement. A variety of feelings mixed in her soul, and she didn't know how she should proceed. Sebastian was the first to make a move toward reconciliation. Leaning on his cane, he came closer to her, but did not dare to embrace her. He looked at his daughter for a minute, and then he cried, "Thank you, daughter, for coming. I didn't expect to see you. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but even you showing up here is a miracle." Betty looked at her father, but she couldn't move. This meeting was very different from what she had envisioned. She thought she'd say everything to the man who traded her and her mother for another woman, but those sincere male tears made her shudder. All the words slipped out of her head at once. Kate stood a little farther away. Noticing her mother's confusion, she rushed to Sebastian. "Grandfather, please don't cry. You have no idea how glad I am that I have a real grandfather now." Sarostin hugged the girl, and his shoulders often trembled. To see a grown man crying was unbearable. By an effort of will, Betty threw off her stupor and immediately felt all the resentments recede away. In a hoarse voice, she mumbled, "Daddy, I've already forgiven you. Just don't cry, please." 2 days of New Year holidays flew by like 1 hour. They spent a magical night in a close family circle. Kate never left her grandfather's side. She was the boss at the table, asking everyone to participate in the games she invented. Betty watched her daughter all these days, never ceasing to be amazed at how she quickly found a common language with her grandfather. Her mother could see that Kate didn't want to leave this place. She thought she would like to stay here for a week or more. During these days, she had thought of her husband only once. True, this message of memory did not upset the woman. He didn't even congratulate me and Kate. Okay, he has a grudge against me. But what did the daughter do? The woman picked up her cell phone several times, but never called her husband. On the eve of the planned departure, Sebastian invited her daughter and granddaughter to his office. Kate immediately put forward her version. Mom gut feel that the grandfather will now start talking about the inheritance. To be honest, I don't want to be there. So what do you suggest? I don't know yet, but I'm sure I'll think of something. This doesn't feel right. I mean, I just got my grandfather and we're leaving again. And his illness. Isn't there a cure? I don't know. Daughter, Mom, you work at the pharmacy. Do you have access to all the medications? Unfortunately, Kate, there are times when the strongest medications don't work. The girl shook her mistakes hair. I should have studied to be a pharmacist. I would definitely have come up with a universal cure for all diseases. Unexpectedly, Sebastian intervened in their conversation. Mother and daughter didn't notice him approach. Granddaughter, there is already such a cure. It's called love. Are you here? I felt better immediately. Believe it or not. Well, that's all philosophical. We've got earthly things to think about. I have a serious conversation with you, or rather a proposal. The man went to his desk and sat down in the chair with difficulty. I will not talk about my granddaughter at the investigation, because I have long ago disposed of my property. I wanted to say something else. You see, I'm very lonely, and my health is failing. I understand that I have no right to ask you. I'd like to live with my family for the last time, even if it's a month or a year, but to live among my relatives. Can you consider this wish as my last request? The man laughed, but it was a strained laugh, and Betty was again pierced by lightning pain. The woman instinctively put her hand to the area of her heart and quietly mumbled this so unexpectedly. We need to think about how best to proceed. Kate adored her mother with a burning gaze. Mom, what is there to think about if you can't give up your pharmacy yet? I can live with Grandpa for a while. I can even take an academic in case of emergency. No, granddaughter, I don't need that kind of sacrifice, but I would appreciate it if you could brighten my loneliness for a short while. This option satisfied everyone, and they sat in Betty's office for a long time. Sebastian told about how almost immediately after leaving his family, he realized that he had made the worst mistake. It wasn't love, it was an obsession. It was like I was blinded. And when I came to my senses, it was too late. I looked for you, but your mom's aunt didn't know where you'd gone. Then I met a buddy from the army and went into business full time. We started out as a security service. And as the business got going, so did we. The money expanded. Basically, that's how life flew by. Only when I was diagnosed with this damn disease, I decided to resume the search. Thanks to new technology, and Anthony is the one who found you. You have no idea how glad I am that you're here. I just wanted to do something nice for you. Kate took the bait immediately. Grandpa, can you grant me one wish? An income of 10? No, just one, but I'll tell you in confidence later, okay? Let it be a surprise for Mom. Betty realizes she's redundant, and she's being polite. You're right, her own daughter came alive from the study. She quietly shut the door behind her and smiled at her thoughts. How nice it is to feel needed. Kate is burning with impatience. I want to please my grandfather. Why didn't I ever think of finding my father before? She knew the answer to that question well, but she didn't want to admit to herself that the resentment had been weighing on her soul. All these years. The next day, Betty set off on her return journey. Kate decided to stay at her grandfather's house. Mom's going on vacation soon anyway. I've passed my credits, so I can stay at Grandpa's for a couple weeks. Especially we need to do something urgent with him. My mother was surprised. Wow, you two already have something in common. Good for you. Her daughter walked her to the train station with her lawyer. From the way Anthony looked at Kate, Betty realized that they were not only professionally interested in each other, but that she liked her father's lawyer, and she didn't mind him courting Kate. The trip to see her father completely changed Betty's outlook. She did not think that in just a few days her life orientations could change so radically. Before, everything revolved around her husband, who demanded special treatment. Now there was a man who needed her love and care. The most surprising thing was that this burden was not a burden to her, and even brought her joy. The apartment was quiet and cold. Unpleasant goosebumps ran down her back. Betty said sadly, "Well, our family hearth has gone out. It's as if the place were haunted, but not inhabited by living people. Why is it so cold? Maybe the heat's been turned off." She touched the radiator and immediately jerked her hand away. "No, it's fine. I may have caught a cold on the road, and I'll get a bit of a pick-me-up." The woman looked around the rooms, noted with surprise that everything was just as it had been the day they left. Even the chair that her daughter had used as a prop when she packed her bag was in the same place. Had Nick not been here all these days? Maybe something had happened to him. She pulled her cell phone out of her bag and had already dialed her husband's number. But remembering how coldly they had said goodbye, she dropped the call. Before the beginning of New Year's Eve, I got them cheerful. The girls from the pharmacy congratulated me. Even the superintendent sent an SMS. Husband forgot about us. The woman sank down on the sofa in the living room and tiredly closed her eyes. How I envy Kate. She's with her grandfather and that lawyer. I'm all alone. And apparently, I have a cold. While the woman lamented the poor start to the new year, Nick felt the book and bliss in her arms. The young woman whispered softly in his ear, "Kitty. But when you and I are together, I'm already tired of hiding, and you yourself understand perfectly well that in a small town like ours, it is impossible to hide our relationship for a long time. Just bear with me a little longer. You can see that I'm making steps towards our happiness." We spent the New Year holidays together. The girl interrupted him impatiently. "And if your old lady hadn't moved out, it's unlikely that you and I would have spent that time together. From behind, be condescending. And don't call my wife an old lady. It's not an insult, it's a statement of fact. I went to the pharmacy where your Betty works, and I'll tell you she looks about 50. Do you feel sorry for her? No. I feel sorry for myself because I've wasted 20 years of my life. To be honest, I stopped going out in public with my wife a long time ago. You're right about her not looking so good. What's that? Not good. She really looks like an old lady with so many wrinkles and skin like parchment. Please spare me the details. I don't like talking about it, and I don't like hiding. Do you have any idea what would happen if my father found out about our affair?" Nick jumped up and down like an electric shock. He didn't like Kathy's insinuation because it didn't fit with his plans for the future. "Kathy, you're not a girl who's been charmed by a grown-up uncle. You can spot anyone yourself in 2 minutes." The man began to measure the small room, which had become a favorite place for their secret rendezvous. "And then I asked you from the beginning, don't bother me. I'll talk to my wife. When the time is right." Kathy pricked the lever behind the stair. "While you're waiting for that moment, my daddy will find another candidate. You think you're the only one applying for the principal's job? Nah, there's more in this line of young and enterprising." He grabbed her roughly by the shoulders. "Are you sleeping with these young and enterprising too?" The girl was not on a joke, frightened Nick. "What do you think you're doing? I do not like such scenes of jealousy. And remember, I'm not used to answer to anyone, and I will not let you tear down in my presence." Kathy said all that in one breath. She dropped his hands from her shoulders and only then bestowed Nick with an icy stare. The man physically felt the coldness emanating from her. He grimaced, looked at his favorite four. "Well, I'm sorry, I snapped and overreacted. But you have to realize that it's all out of love. You're making me crazy. Honestly, I don't care about the director's chair anymore. I just want to be happy, and that's only possible with you." Kathy immediately turned from anger to grace. "The only way you'll be with me, Kitty, is if you change your marital status. And I suggest you hurry up. By the way, you should call. Maybe your old lady is back already?" Nick obeyed Kathy without much desire. He picked up his cell phone from the coffee table and dialed his wife's number. "Betty, it's me. Happy New Year. I'm sorry I couldn't get to you in time. I left my cell phone at home." "Yeah, I spent Christmas. Why are you sick?" "Okay, I'll be right there." All this time, Kathy stood opposite and watched him with a contemptuous smile. When Nick turned off his cell phone, she said with a sneer, "God, how touching is that? Honey, are you sick? Be patient, I'll be there soon. Don't forget your wife's ears and milk." Nick could see that Kathy would cry with resentment in a minute. So he put his arms around her. "Just 5 minutes ago, you had me all to yourself. Went home, and now you don't want to let me go." The girl exclaimed, "There's a big reason again. And you won't talk to her. I feel like this is going to go on forever. Here's to it, and calm down. I promise I'll sort it out this week. She's not going to be sick forever. Colds go away in 3 to 5 days. I'll call you tomorrow. I'll keep you posted." That promise calmed the girl down a little. Nick walked home, and his thoughts remained in that cozy room with one window, which had a stunning view of the city park. That evening, he didn't want to go back to his apartment like never before. As soon as I imagined my wife, whose face always expressed the same feeling, nausea immediately came to my throat. This unpleasant sensation had appeared long ago and was increasing every day. Nick even sinfully thought that his wife had cast a spoil on him. But then he dismissed the thought. Betty would never stoop to such baseness. She is an educated woman and not jealous. But Kathy's point about her looks is very true. Though her figure would be the envy of any woman. The man mentally enumerated all the advantages of his wife and decided that the main positive qualities were her unique ability to get along with everyone. Indeed, Betty, for all the years of their life together, never once made a scene to him, although knew about his occasional affairs on the side. She silently forgave him for going to the left for the sake of keeping the family together. And all these years, Nick was satisfied with the restraint of his wife. But recently, this positive quality began to irritate him a lot. And only now he realized why it was happening. Betty cold as a fish, wicked hot. And that's exactly the kind of hot women men like. And I have nothing to be embarrassed about when I want to be with this incredible woman. I need to keep talking to her, especially since I sense Betty's got a clue. He opened the apartment door with determination. "Betty, your Dr. Abolite has arrived from the living room," came his wife's husky voice. "Nick, believe me, I'm not laughing. Apparently, I picked up some kind of infection on the trip, so you'd better stay away from me. Who's gonna fix you? Now I'm in for a live pair of garlic cloves, and no germs will take me." The man went to the kitchen, humming a popular song. "Christmas is coming. Soon everything's gonna happen. Betty, where did you lose our daughter?" The woman was singing about bread. "She stayed with her grandfather." "So the unknown relative is your father." "I'm sorry, Nick, but it hurts to talk. My throat is burning. I'll tell you all about it later." The man brought warm tea, touched her forehead with his hand. "You sound like a mother. Tell me, what pills should I give you to bring down your fever?" "Bring the medicine cabinet. It's in the kitchen. I'll pick out what I need." By evening, Betty was feeling a little better, but she was not yet in a condition to talk to her about serious things. Nick was weighed down by everything: Betty's sudden illness, the uncertainty at work, and the strange coldness of the apartment. He paced nervously around the room and ran his hand over the radiators. Betty said with a chuckle, "The heating system was fine. I checked. Where's the cold coming from?" I don't understand. There was nothing more to talk about. Nick's desire to help his wife quickly burned out in his soul, and he hurried to seclude himself in the bedroom. Only on the fourth day Betty felt better. She decided to go down to the first floor to check the mailbox. Kate had called the night before to say that she had sent her a very important document by registered mail. Mom, Grandpa, and I decided to surprise you. I'm sure you'll be surprised, but it's up to you. How do you want to handle this? The woman had not yet fully recovered from her weakness. She was dizzy. Kate, what is this stupid way of talking to your mother in riddles? Not now, but I don't want a surprise in yours. I can barely stand on my feet. That's why I've decided to give you a little bit of information. When you get the letter, call me. I will. Kate, why don't you ask about Dad? Why wouldn't I? He didn't even congratulate us. Dad said he was visiting. He left his cell phone at home. And you believe him. Well, that's your own business. Yesterday, during this conversation, Betty didn't pay attention to the intonation in her daughter's voice. But today, as her head began to clear, she realized that her daughter knew something but wasn't telling her the whole story. She thought again with irritation, all the while puzzled. She shouldn't be writing fantasy novels. There was indeed a registered letter receipt notice in the mailbox. At first, the woman wanted to postpone her visit to the post office until tomorrow, but then she changed her mind. I wondered what she had sent there. Slowly, we crawled to the post office. It took her almost 2 hours to get to the post office. She was on her way home, barely able to move her legs. And damn it, I had to drag myself out here today. All I needed was to get a complication before I called the elevator. Betty, on a hunch, headed for the mailbox again and was surprised to find something white there. She muttered, I wonder who put a message in there. In the box was a thick, unstamped envelope with only her name printed on it. Something about the message made the woman suspicious, and she was in no hurry to open the envelope. First, I'll see what my daughter sent me by registered mail. There was a copy of the contract for a deal to buy a woodworking mill. Betty didn't immediately realize that the document was in her name. The name of the company seemed painfully familiar to her, and she exhaled in surprise. So this was the mill where Nick worked. But how had those two managed to concoct this deal so quickly? A surprise indeed. I can only imagine how pleased Nick will be. Betty put the document aside and went into the kitchen to make dinner. She remembered about the second envelope when the cooking process was in full swing. The woman began to hastily open it. The thin paper tore and the color pictures fell on the floor. There were only 5 of them, but Betty spent half an hour looking at them. The shock was so intense that the woman didn't realize she was sitting on the floor. She only came back to reality when the front door opened. Nick's cheerful voice shouted out, "How are you feeling?" Betty gathered the pictures from the floor and walked out with them to greet her husband, feeling much worse than she did. The man raised his eyebrows in surprise. Betty, what's with the tone? Did she put the pictures in his hands? How do you expect me to talk to you after that? Nick cast only a glance at the top photo and covered himself in vapor. Where did you get this? Do you know better? The blood rushed to his temples, and he forgot about everything in the world. So, I cheated on you, and I did it with great pleasure. Look at you, you're like the forbidden apple, trying to make yourself look like something worthwhile. You should be scrapped and not making a show of it. Don't forget, this is my apartment. She forced herself to hold back her tears and patiently listen to all of her husband's insults. When Nick reminded her that he was the owner of the apartment, she quietly said, "Okay, I will get out of here today." The man shouted in excitement, "Yes, please, I'm sick of your sour face. And I'm sick of that unbearable drugstore smell that permeates this apartment. I suggest you go to a monastery. That's where you belong. You'll be in some almshouse treating the poor and the weak." While her husband talked about her future, Betty packed the very same bag with which she had recently returned from a trip to her father's house. She was about to slam the door when she saw the envelope with the registered letter on the nightstand in the hallway. She laughed in her husband's face. "Nick, you're getting excited early. I'll leave today and you'll be out of a job tomorrow." His wife's laughter startled Nick, but he quickly mastered himself, unhappy. "Are you threatening me? What are you capable of?" "Yes, look, so to speak, familiarize yourself with the document. It's a copy, and my father has the original. So don't think there's no one to protect me." Nick had snatched the document from his wife's hands. As he studied this document, the expression on his face changed. But that can't be true. Kathy said that Betty was not interested in listening to what Kathy was telling her husband. She called Aunt Miranda, who lived nearby, and asked to spend the night at her place. Miranda gladly agreed. "Betty, don't even hesitate. You can stay with me until you get bored. My old man won't say a word against it. He's my kind of guy." The woman decided to take advantage of this kind woman's hospitality. She told her family tragedies and asked her not to tell anyone at work that her husband had kicked her out. In the morning, Betty wrote a statement explaining her decision to urgently dismiss with her father's illness. Even at night, the station square was bustling with life. Nick had lived in the big city for more than 5 years, but he could not get used to its rhythm. Maneuvering between cars, he made his way to the parking lot, hoping to find a standing customer. A dozen or two people with bags and suitcases crowded in line. But Nick knew that he couldn't get much from such passengers. The man waved his hand doomfully, thinking, "Yes, today I'm definitely a total bummer, considering that the day was wasted. At least I could cover the cost of fuel." He carefully turned onto a narrow strip of road leading to a patch of road where people were waiting for their turn. But suddenly, as if from under the ground, a man in a strong outfit with a briefcase in his hands rushed out in front of him. Nick was an experienced driver and had a good reaction. He hit the brakes, followed by a sharp screech of wheels of the inadequate man on the hood of his car with darting eyes. And Nick yelled at him, "Where are you going? Right under the wheels, or are you fed up with life?" The guy exhaled and quickly moved to the car door. He sat down confidently in the back seat. The briefcase he placed next to him. Only then did he utter, "Commander, don't swear, sorry, inconvenienced you. But I'm in a big hurry. An inconvenience? Are you really stupid? I almost crushed you. Are you burning up in one place?" The guy smiled, embarrassed. "No, I don't. My wife's having a baby. I had to leave on a business trip." Nick considered it a serious reason and slowed down a bit. His wife is having a baby. It's important. "Where do you want me to take you home?" "No, first home to the village of Sukhoi. That's over 100 kilometers." Nick was about to drop off the passenger, but he begged the commander, "Don't be so cruel. Imagine yourself in my shoes, and I'll pay for it and put a little extra on top." "Why so rich?" The guy smiled again. "He's not poor. He owns his own law firm. We got married just a year ago. The ultrasound said it's a boy." "Congratulations." "Thank you. Honestly, it feels amazing. I've never been a father before." And then in one day, everything changed. Sometimes an hour, even a minute, can change a life. "I know. I used to be a bit of a bad boy, too. How did you meet your Helen?" The guy started to talk about his happy life, and Nick couldn't get rid of the thought that he'd seen him somewhere before. No matter how hard he strained his memory, she wouldn't give him an answer. They were almost to this very village with a strange name when it suddenly clicked in his brain. It was the same kid that Zorka had seen off at the train station. His heart pounded frantically, and Nick hesitantly asked Happy Daddy, "Isn't your name Max by any chance?" The young man froze with amazement for a second, and then loudly barked, "That's right, Commander. Have we met before? That's why I see that your face looks familiar to me. Have you ever been here before?" Nick nodded. "I've been there. I lived there most of my adult life, and then I gave it all up." The lawyer sighed heavily. "I didn't make it either. And the main thing is, it was all my stupidity that made it happen. I don't even want to remember. Anyway, I was dating a cool girl. We went to uni together. Only she was 3 years younger than me. We planned to get married, but they say you can't plan anything in life." Nick felt a strange excitement and clung to the steering wheel. "So the knuckles won. And what's keeping you from getting married?" "Not what, but who is she?" "A femme fatale, Commander." "Do you believe there are women like that who ruin their lives?" Nick with a long voice wheezed. "I believe you. I had one of those too. I fell head over heels in love with her. And that's at the age of 45. It confirmed the proverb that the gray in the beard and the devil in the rib. And that love knocked me in the ribs. Lost my family, my job. Now I'm standing like this. You're really in a jam, Commander. I woke up in time to find out that my Kathy was tangling with a married man. I was running for my life. I wanted to reconnect with my girlfriend. She sent me away, and rightly so. The guy sighed expressively again and fell silent. Nick felt his mouth dry. It turns out that your fatal woman's name was Kathy. And you, Commander, who screwed up your life? Nick tried to hide his confusion behind laughter. I don't think you know her. My femme fatale lived in another city. I also spoiled everything. And then she dumped me like a boy. The passenger woke up and philosophically remarked, yes, women are mysterious creatures. With them, you should always keep your nose to the wind. But I was very lucky to have met Helen. Her father is rich, but he brought up his daughter properly. She reminds me a lot of Kate, my first love. Nick hit the brakes, and the passengers almost fell to the floor. Chief, what are you doing? Robbing a young father. It's your own fault. You distracted me. Why do I need to know the details of your life? I've got enough problems of my own. It's all yours, Sukova or Sukotin, to shake out of the car. The young lawyer paid and disappeared into the darkness of the night. Nick looked back at the back seat and noticed their left Mac's briefcase. He had to jump out of the car and catch up with the happy father. Back in the driver's seat, Nick tried to gather his thoughts, but he couldn't concentrate on one thing at a time. He easily guessed that the random passenger was the same guy his daughter was dating. It turns out that Kathy was having an affair with both him and Kate's beau at the same time. The man whispered thoughtfully, "That's an interesting story, but I'm an old guard. How could I fall for such a divorce? How could I not immediately recognize this painted doll?" For 5 years, Nick tried to forget about his main mistake, which made him the most unhappy man in the world. To put it in literary terms, all these years he tried to turn the proverbial page, which is written about in thick novels. But to start life not from scratch, no matter how much he tried, he failed. Then, when everything collapsed, he often recalled that evening, when he humiliated his sick wife in one of the heater. The horror of it all was that it was Kathy's doing. He called Betty all sorts of names and then shoved her out the door. When Betty had sent copies of the contract in front of his nose, he hadn't believed it. He thought she'd made up that piece of paper herself. He thought then that his daughter had orchestrated the whole thing. After all, Kate was also a good master of various provocations. After his wife left, he called Kathy to tell her the good news. "Kathy is mine. I'm free. Congratulate me." They spent the night joking around in some diner on the outskirts of town. And in the morning, we drove together to his apartment. They spent a few magical days together. He was eager to share his plans for the future with Kathy. "Tomorrow, I'm filing for divorce. And then you and I are going to spell everything out." He thought Kathy would sob on his chest with happiness. But she looked at him strangely and remained silent. The next day, Martin gathered all the staff in the small auditorium. "My friends, our globe is spinning and everything on it is changing. That means that nothing is permanent, no matter how hard you try. And you and I are in for a change, too." Nick, after a stormy night, was somewhere high in the clouds, and the words of the chief flew past him. But one of the foremen pushed him painfully in the side. "Nick, what are you afraid of? We're all being thrown out on the street, and he's crushing a block." Nick came down from the sky like he was on the street. On the other side, he got a mocking shout. "You shouldn't have entertained the chief's daughter. Engineer, you didn't have any luck either. He's selling our Paris." So the workers, in the eyes of the businessmen, their farm, say that with taxes he managed something, and he was offered a favorable deal, which he could not refuse. This information was confirmed. True, not all the workers were left out. Some of the new owner, that is, his representative, offered to stay. But Nikita Andreevich, no one offered a job at the company, in which he has invested his soul without exaggeration. He immediately remembered that damned paper and his wife's threats. And instead of falling at her feet and tearfully asking for forgiveness, he called and said some nasty things. Betty hung up on him, and a short time later, Kate called. "Daddy, I thought you were a smart man, and you ruined everything." Now Mom will never forgive you for anything in the world." He yelled into the phone, "I don't need your forgiveness. Leave me alone. Both of you." It was the last act of a play called Happy Family. Nick didn't immediately realize that it was only with Vetua and Kate that he was truly happy, and now there were only glimmers of that happiness. But these glimmers did not make his soul happy or sorrowful. The Martin thing soon took off somewhere. For about a month they met Kathy, and then she told Kathy, "I have to tell you that I'm getting married. My fiancé is a foreigner. He's the adopted son of one of Daddy's partners." This blow finally killed him with a job in his hometown. Nick didn't find one. Neighbors, acquaintances openly laughed at him. In order not to be an outgoing laughingstock, he sold his apartment and left for another region, as he could not afford to buy a decent place to live on the proceeds from the sale of the apartment. And he had to live on something, had to take the corner off, from behind the amplified signal of a motorist who couldn't make it to his house. Nick snapped out of the maelstrom of memories and gently touched down. The disgruntled drivers still decided to voice their outrage. "If I see you again in our village, I'll poke your tires." Nick muttered, "It's unlikely that fate will bring me here again. And in general, it's never too late, even at 50, to start over." It didn't work out. Once you have to go for a second try, third, fourth, you'll still get it someday. Kate ran out into the garden and looked around. "Anthony, have you seen my mom?" The still needle-dressed Betty's lawyer answered briefly, "They are in the gazebo." Sebastian decided to play a game of chess. "Yeah, Grandpa likes to rack his brain." And who is he playing with? Mom doesn't know chess. The young man poems. He sat the janitor down. He seems to have some sense. "Kate, what's so urgent that you're looking for your mother? Would you rather watch Steph?" Kate looked at her husband unhappily. "You're a father, go look after your son. And I'm entitled to a vacation too. So, all day long, I'm running around like a weatherman. Anthony, I beg you." I also looked at my wife. "Kate, please don't start. We agreed to take care of our son. It's your turn." Then I've been switched for about 20 minutes. "Where do you think you're going?" "Nowhere. I have to get my mom ready." Anthony's eyes sparkled. "Well, that's interesting. What are you up to again?" "I'm going to tell you." "You're going to watch." I said I'll watch. "Anthony, I've decided to reconcile my parents. Of course, I realize it's hopeless, but my dad should be here any minute. He and I have an agreement, but I have to get my mom ready so she doesn't faint. And my grandfather could ruin everything." The young woman was already heading toward the gazebo, but her husband stopped her. "Kate, there's no need to interfere. They'll sort it out themselves. And Sebastian, he's old, but he's not showing signs of dementia yet." Kate looked at her husband in disbelief. "Anthony, you have no idea how much effort I've put into this meeting. And if it goes wrong, it will be a disaster." A car appeared on the road leading to the village. Kate clutched her hands to her chest. "Anthony, he's coming. Look, get Steph down here." The father will see his grandson make a break for it, and the mother will see him crying and forgive him. "Kate, you definitely made the wrong career choice. Should you have gone into directing? It's my fault I'm good at it." Nick walked uncertainly along the path leading to the mansion, and the farther he got from the gate, the more anxious he became. There was a traitorous thought somewhere near his temple. "You shouldn't be doing this. She'll send you away, Betty, and rightly so, for you don't deserve her forgiveness." The first to notice the guest was the host's chess partner. "It seems you have a visitor." Betty was reading a book while the men were thinking of moves, so she didn't notice Nick until after her father had slapped her lightly on the arm. "The party. Aren't there two pretty girls going out?" The women, barely audible, mumbled mine. But how did he know? And why did he come here? After all he had done, he dared to come here. Sebastian said sternly to Betty, "You be careful, you know righteous people are rare. 1 or 2 at a time. You have to be able to forgive. That's what God says. You forgave me, but you're my father's blood, and he's your daughter's father. Help me get out of here. I don't want to disturb you." The janitor volunteered to help Kirillovich's master. "Jana, what can I get you when you ask?" He stood there and didn't dare to look her in the eye. Betty, on the contrary, looked at her husband with pity. You've lost a lot of weight. Life's been a little rough. You have a grandson. I know I do. Kate told me. She found me. You know, she's the boss of us. Suddenly, he's got his hands up to the sky. Betty's not talking about that. That's not what I'm talking about. Forgive me, for God's sake, I can't. I'm alone. I'm sorry. He fell to her lap and began kissing her hands. At some point, Betty felt that her hands were wet. She realized with horror that they were tears. Her heart clenched with pity and pain, and a thought pounded in her head. But why exactly did I have to endure all this? 2 of the dearest people betrayed me first and then apologized to me. She dropped her hand to her husband's head. Don't, Nick, stand up. Look, Kate's death is coming. It's time you met your grandson. He whispered quietly, Betty, will you forgive me? I don't know yet, but I'll try. She knew very well that she had waited for this day in secret. Hoped he would be, but he didn't want to talk about it. Though there was pain on her heart, the moment Betty saw her husband, she realized how much she missed him.